Call the meeting to order. Do roll call, please.
Mr. Duncan,
Here.
Mr. Portillo,
Here.
Mr. Batolo, Mr. Bider,
Here.
Chairman Gray.
Here. All right, has everybody had a chance to review the agenda as proposed and written? Is there any additions or deletions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda as written.
I'll motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we'll go to communications and correspondence.
None.
None? Okay. We'll go to board action, approval of minutes of July 21, 2021. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any additions or deletions to the minutes? There are none. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as written.
A motion.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Go to the treasurer's report. Mr. Scott.
Thank you. Beginning balance, Rock Springs National, $698,768.49. There was interest earned for the period of 5/33/25. Receipts from the county treasurer, $10,662.83 for an ending balance of $709,964.57. For the WGF account, the beginning balance, $9,105,012.39. There's interest for the period, $911.68 for an ending balance of $9,105,924.07.
Is there any questions on the treasurer's report?
No.
All right, having none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the treasurer's report as given and presented.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we'll go to warrants and reimbursement.
Yes, there are no warrants, nor are there any reimbursements back to the general fund.
Okay, having none. I'll entertain a motion to accept the warrants and reimbursements as written.
I'll motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, move on to board information, update on board projects.
I can-
Mr. Sorelli.
Yeah, I can start us off and then we can kick them over to
Okay.
Mark or Dan as we need to. So we're talking about the projects under the expenditures, and I don't think we've got any charges yet for any of those first few line items. Dan or Mark, if you want to jump in on the evaluation and the stress tests, because don't you usually do them about this time of year? The impact
Yeah,
testing?
we do, but since the high school field is new, what we're and they've already done one. They did one when they first put the field down in order to have a baseline. Excuse me. I think what we'll probably end up doing is before spring sports come out, start up, we'll just have them come in and go ahead and do all the concussion tests on those fields, because it'd be these two fields and then the one up in Farson. So.
We're also working on punch list stuff for the high school field with Ellis, and they've done a number of those. When they're complete, at least the field, I think we'll request another one from them to get that done from them.
Okay.
Another cushion.
Yeah, concussion test.
What about the track? Did they go through that?
They're working on
Ellis is-
repairing those two. The issues that we have with the track.
Okay, and then the stadium scoreboard, moving the scoreboard.
You're talking the one that was
Yeah,
moved to the junior
That's
high?
been issued to ECI Electrical, so they're humped up pretty good with satellite schools, so as soon as they get time, then we'll send some people over. They've evaluated it, they know what they need to do, and they'll get started with it.
Okay, the Rock Springs High School auditorium, the stage resurfacing.
I do believe that's complete. We had that done this summer, both them and Parsons. Stage has been done.
So we haven't had any warrants issued on that then? It's complete?
We have not paid them. And then you talked about the turf and the track replacement at the high school. And so are those encumbered amounts still good, Mark, do you think?
Yes, I do believe they are.
Okay, and Dan talked about the geo study already. The design for the turf field replacement?
We went out for an RFQ and it's due tomorrow. I've actually had about 6 different professional services call up, everywhere from California to, well, some in Cheyenne, a couple of them from around here, Evanston. So I think we're going to have a good turnout as far as requests for qualifications. Made it really simple. I had some of the guys call me up and they asked me for a packet. I started laughing. I says, I'm not issuing a packet. My time's too valuable and so is yours. I said, what I need is information on your company. Are you qualified to do this project? You know, have you done a project like that before? I just sent them out a basic as to, you know, what we're looking for to help us out on doing this track. One of the biggest issues was we wanted to make sure that whoever we get can spend the time on the field. We're asking, just like the state does, 20 hours a week during construction. But I'm also getting a lot of manufacturers contact us. And one of the quandaries that we have is there's only, I didn't know, I just found out there's only really 4 manufacturers of all turf, surfaces. And they sell to all these subcontractors who market it as under their name. And what they were telling me is with those systems, we just need to have a professional service on board to decipher which field will fit and work on the system that we have. The HELA system isn't a patent pending type system. You know, they use it other places. So my biggest issue is where I want to make sure that whoever we hire can come in, look at the field that we have, look at the subsurface that we have, check out the drainage system. We don't have any issues with this drainage system like we did with the one at the junior high. So once we can determine that, then we'll put out for the bids, and the architect or engineer, professional service, they'll put the bid packet together. Once we get the bid packet, they'll sit down with us and review what will work the best on our surface. It's kind of interesting because every one of the manufacturers, they've called up and said, well, we can send you an RFQ, but that would mean that they would design, build, they would design it, they would oversee the construction and, do the work. And I says, no, we're not going to let, we don't do that. We have to have a third party and it's somebody who can come in and kind of look at what we're doing and give us an objective opinion.
We're just doing the field, right? We're not doing the track?
Correct. It's just the turf. Yeah.
And we want to make sure whoever gets that contract, they're not going to tear that track up as they're
Yeah.
replacing the field.
Yeah, that'll be, and that's when we go through the RFQs. Then if we have enough RFQs to actually do interviews, then we'll do interviews and, go through everything as far as that. But they'll know once we get the RFQs, we'll sit down and go through that process. Now, I do have a question for for you folks is when we get the RFQs, do you want to sit in? Do you want me to send you copies of qualifications, whatever we get? Do you want me to just go through them? Normally from the school facility side, I go through through everything. We have a committee and then we decide who we're going to interview. And based on that interview, we have a rubrics and that's who we pick.
Well, there might be a question pop up that how could you sole source the high school and not do the junior high?
And that's fine because the answer to that was the drainage system at the high school was not working properly. And that drainage system needed to be looked at the concern back then, if you remember, was putting that turf field onto that system. If you had somebody come in and say, hey, you know what, your drainage system here is foobarred, there's nothing we can do about it. We did several geo studies to find out that there was issues with that system. Hellas, if you remember, they fully warranted. They came in and did all that drainage system because when the guy came in, he was an older guy who'd been with the company. He said, we know we haven't done this type of a drainage system forever. He said, this was improperly done. And that's what the one fear that we had when we did that, because we knew from the get-go that there was something wrong with the drainage system. So that was why we kind of, well, let's do a, proprietary on this. On this one, all we're doing now is replacing the turf, the actual, the grass surface and the pellets. And we have had absolutely no issues with drainage on this field. We don't have any wear on the track. If you remember when we did the geo study, we bore through the track and we found that there were several soft spots. And so it was our hope at the time, because we did have the extended warranty on the track and field, that, something would be done, that if you brought in another company, they're going to say, well, that's not my, that wasn't my design. So, it's going to cost you this much. There was hidden expenses that we worried about. This is pretty simple. There is no drainage issue. We're just taking off the turf, taking out the pellets and replacing it. And I've talked to, I'll bet you so far I've talked to about 4 other companies that do this, and every one of them says that now that's not an issue, as long as you know you don't have an issue. So that's why we're going to bid on this one. We didn't on Hellas.
I think I'd like to keep the board informed on the bids and the RFQ.
Okay.
Also, I think we want to make sure that whoever gets the contract, that the system is compatible to the equipment
Right.
we purchased to maintain the high schools, so that we can use that equipment and not lose any
Right.
warranty or anything.
Dan, do you think we should consider a concussion pad for that field?
Well, I think that's why we hire the professional service when they come in, because I don't know what thickness, concussion pad we had there. It was kind of ironic because, like the track, for instance, here, this track was the lesser expensive track. It was the base model, and they paid extra for what we, first received up at the high school. And what we received at the high school was really, for our climate, not the track to have. So, I think you find that kind of stuff out by hiring somebody who's competent as far as, they've done these fields before, and they can tell you. Now, every one of them that I talk to is, will tell you, well, these guys come in selling their systems and they all want to sell you the, Rolls Royce because it's better for, but the reality is, we've had good luck with our fields. Our fields have lasted quite a while. If it comes time to improve by putting in the concussion pad, which, this board chose to do when we did the high school, then I think that's a smart move. But if we already have a thick pad and, had we have had the thicker pad up at the high school, we could have reused it. Everyone was in agreement, the engineer and as well as the folks from Hellas. So I think, if they recommend a thicker concussion pad, you've got the field ripped up, you might as well put it down just for safety, safety for the kids, liability, God forbid something does happen and you didn't do it. You did an awful lot of work and you didn't take extra precautions for, concussion. I think that's kind of
So
chump
you-
change.
Are you getting any money from the school facilities for the replacement?
I'll get some money from the school facilities, but it won't be a whole lot. So,
You guys got any more on that?
Nope.
All right.
Okay, the feasibility study.
But now I see what about now you said we're not doing the track, but we have money in here to do it.
So I think we
Just
discussed
a surface, I
resurfacing.
yeah, there was a
Resurface.
surface that we were going to put over the track, kind of like a coating.
Yeah.
And that would extend the life of the track.
Okay.
And again, Leo, to answer you, there's where I can get the school facilities money, because the track is a track and was supplied probably with school facilities. It's the enhancement of the turf field. If you remember the same thing up at the high school, they don't pay for a turf field, but they do pay for tracks. They will maintain and replace what they originally give you, but nothing above that.
That's Scott.
Feasibility study, high school.
Okay, the feasibility study honestly has absolutely gone nowhere. And mainly is because, to be honest, I just don't have the time. And to go out for an RFQ to hire a professional service to do something that is probably, I mean, we can have something shelf ready to, come up with in 2 years or so. But honestly, at this point, I'm not sure that we can take on something like in the next year of redesigning everything, everything that we have there. I think we'd be better served, the district would be better served by putting together some thoughts and ideas and drawings in-house and then going out for a feasibility study to see if it would work. But to go out and spend, and it'd be a lot of money on, well, I think, what did we put here? 10,000, yeah, okay, so $45,000 for a feasibility study right now. I think we should hold off at least until summer, and then maybe bring somebody in and look at it and see.
I think that I was looking at that the other day. I know those stairs going from
Yeah,
the top of the hill down, those, I'm surprised somebody hasn't taken a tumble all the way down
Yeah.
those things. Those look like a pretty big safety hazard to me. Right?
they are. And nothing there is within, like ADA compliance and current building codes for sure. But I do believe that during tennis, they're supposed to be blocking those off and kind of directing everybody down to the lower parking lot. Because that is accessible for ADA, and they can get cars around there, especially if you look towards the west. We talked about pulling cars in there. I do have some drawings that we did when we looked at the overall, when I did all that reconfiguration. So I do have some drawings. But as far as feasibility study, as we looked at, when we talked about so many things, moving the tennis courts instead of the way they currently are, but putting them in a row in the back, and then not even worrying about the steps and everything, just open that all up. Because if you took the tennis courts where they're now back to back and you made them all in a single line, then you'd have area that you can put stands in, you can put concrete base, you can reconfigure your driveway. I mean, I can tell you things, I can give you a list of things that a feasibility study right now is going to, duplicate and then put the cost to it. I mean, I think that right now, if you guys, if the board wants me to put a feasibility study so we know what we're looking at cost wise, honestly, I think we can probably sit down in-house, because after we did all that ADA compliance, I have a pretty good idea and some drawings that we can put together some RS means prices and come up with what it's going to take to, get that where it needs to be.
Well, I think that's probably
Yeah, I
we
think
could
that's a
probably
better
do that
way to
and
do it.
have somebody, like Mr. Jasmine, go through what he would like to see and set it up to get the parking and that
Right.
situation taken care of. I'm sure we could come up with something that we want as a simple plan and then give it to an engineering firm to come up with the spec or something.
I agree. And I think if we can come up with the idea, and Tom and I, actually, that's where we got the idea of putting the tennis courts on the west side and then opening up all that area. I already know that the restroom area there would have to be redone. We have to gain some kind of space parking ability down low, because you do have your ADA, you're going to have people that pull up in the cars. And right now where you park and then how you get to the court is kind of inconvenient. But we do have that service road that goes around there. They do have stands that are on the west side. But if you remove those and reconfigured your tennis courts, I think we gain an awful lot by going the west side, north and south, and keeping all of our courts in a line like that, because that opens up a tremendous amount of area. And I can put something together, and I think even individually, if anybody wants to stop down in the office and kind of throws in some ideas on Google Earth, and we can come up with something I think a lot more practical and what fits our needs. Like I said, we already know what we have to do for ADA compliance. We know what we have to do for the public safety.
Is there a
So-
set number of stands? Do you have to have a set number that you could put there for bleachers that you would have to have?
I don't believe that I don't believe that there's a code that tells me how many stands I have to have for the amount of tennis courts, because when I originally looked into it for ADA compliance, they have it for football stadiums. If you considered the tennis courts a stadium, then there is, a code that you would have to follow. But overall, I don't believe, unless, Matt, do you know?
If you're just flat there, you don't have requirements. The requirements come when you have a set of bleachers within that bleacher
Right.
section, and the accessibility, similar to the junior high, not
Mhm.
the high school now, but
Right.
if you have stands and a flat area next to them, you're fine.
Yeah, it kind of works. There's not the code. The code is for when you already put the bleachers. You say this is what my seating capacity is. That's when you have more code issues than these are my tennis courts. How many seats do I have to have? That's an arbitrary number. So,
Well, I think we ought to move forward with just a simple plan that
In-house.
we put together and come up with something.
okay.
And in that, Dan, before we move on, can we plan to do the other end also? That whole minus the track and where
The grass
the
area?
throwing areas are?
Uh-huh.
I don't know what kind of shape that storage area is in.
Yeah.
Is there anything in this package? Can we do something on that side to make either better storage over there or some parking accessibility on that side?
Yeah. Actually,
Do it all at once instead of do one end and
Yeah.
then come back and do the other end?
Originally when we had planned was I was going to modify all that area except the tennis courts, but like the parking area, the
Uh-huh.
storage area with the city's project
Yeah.
for the safe travel, Safeway for kids. And I had money set aside for that. But since that has kind of, with COVID and everything else, has kind of been slowed down, that's the only reason why I haven't really done anything there. If they had that obstacle course there at one time, we removed that for safety reasons. Plus, it was an eyesore. But mainly too was I wanted to bring in parking areas, some picnic areas, make that area more usable. Because I mean, it's nice to have the tennis courts here, but it'd also be nice, from when Grandma and Grandpa come and watch. They have a picnic table, something for the people who aren't doing anything, in
But-
between matches.
Yeah, and we talked about that before, but I'm talking on the Cottonwood side. So while we look at that tennis court area, the Cottonwood side up to where the facilities start, you got that dirt area on the right side where
Right.
the storage building is.
Okay. All right.
That's, that section over there also, if we're going to look at that, maybe we can have an idea on that right side of that also.
Isn't the football team using that now?
Well, they use the practice area next to the tennis courts. I'm talking on the total other side of the field, right next to Cottonwood.
Talking about
Yeah.
where the new disc is or shot.
Yeah,
shot
because it
puts are?
becomes it's a cluster down there because that's where the bus pickup is now.
Okay, right there, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
For
Now,
the athletic events, the bus pickups down there, and that area is an absolute mess.
have
As
you
far
been
as
there?
there's a hill, there's parking
Yeah.
everywhere. It's gravel. My suggestion would be just to look at that while we're looking at the other one and see if we can
Okay.
incorporate one project.
Yeah, Mark, when he was doing the track, Mark talked to Lewis and they did pave that area.
That's
Did they?
paved, that's repaved
Yeah.
now.
I haven't been over there. I've just been on the street side.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
they
dropping the kid
they
off and
paved it
stuff.
and we put down ADA parking for
Oh, see?
van
Then you're
van
done.
access.
Yeah,
Look
yeah,
at
you
Mark.
should go look at it.
Okay.
It's really nice.
My bad. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Get a chance, drive down there.
Yeah,
take a look.
well, thanks.
All right, any more on that? We'll go to the Stagecoach Gym.
Okay, Stagecoach Gym. For those of you who haven't been there, we end up digging all that out and we put in a special foundation, kind of a grid foundation to overcome the expansive soils. The flooring has been put in. They did their humidity tests, and now we just saw they were scheduled to come in next week, but there's a delay, and so they're going to come in. Is it the week of the 13th or something like that? The only thing that I have left on that, other than the gym floor, is where they cut the double doors. They didn't put a lintel in, and I know that we ordered steel doors, but the steel doors aren't really wide enough to what I would say perform as a lintel, supporting lintel. So this weekend, starting Friday, there'll be a company comes in and they're going to cut and put in they're going to put a lintel in on the outside to support the brick, and they're building a new structural frame on the inside to support the rest of the block that we have. But as far as the floor itself, all that's done. The doors have been put in. They're all completed. Flooring will be down a week from Monday.
First and Greenhouse project.
Okay, on the greenhouse project, the last I heard from was the contractor who's going to do the installation. And he's supposed to get back with me, let me know when they're going to start. At first, he didn't think that we were going to go forward with it, so he hadn't put it on his schedule. I haven't heard anything from him, and so I just never got back to the guy either. I mean, last conversation I had to him told him that we were moving forward with it, so get everything scheduled. He said he was going to do that, and he's supposed to supply me because we still have a contract with the guy, and he hasn't sent me any information. So I'll try to get a hold of him before I go to Casper this week and see where he's at. But yeah, we need a contract from him before we move forward.
Okay. Sound shells. The Rock Springs High School auditorium.
That's
Haven't
not,
heard anything on that.
that would be them in-house. Yeah, I would imagine that they would have to provide, go through Scott's office to get a purchase order. So
Did they give us some bids or design?
They did, they had money or bids from before. I think that's where Scott got these numbers.
Yeah, but this price, you'd have to go out for sealed bids, so they would have to go through that whole process.
So it's who has to do that? Initiate that process, put it that way.
Well, it depends on how much legwork we want them to do. My suggestion would be to have Mark run that process for those, because you're pretty familiar with the
Yeah.
Wenger risers and the storage and the whole 9 yards with.
Yeah.
with
I'll make it a
those.
point to get with him and talk to him about his bids. And then our office will go through and put in send out for request for bids. Dan, are you okay with that?
Junior high wrestling mats.
that's a purchase, I would think.
Yeah, I think
Doesn't come through me.
that's just them purchasing it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll reach out to them and see where they're at with those at the junior high.
When does wrestling start?
January?
Okay, wetland park equipment, riprap.
Yep, that's me. Met with a designer and just to kind of go walk through the park and just get an idea of what kind of equipment is available, what we can put down because you still have to have fall protection, something that we could integrate with the community and the school. And she brought up a good point of maybe putting in a lower loop for ADA, because one thing that they're seeing is a lot of ADA usage of outdoor parks. So we're kind of in the process of that. In fact, it's just this morning, she sent me an email wanting to know if she can have a Google map of that area marked out where we want where I think I want to put the equipment. She looked at some of the timbers. In fact, she took pictures of all the timbers because she says she hasn't seen playground equipment like that in decades. And, they're they're like telephone poles is what it's made out of. And I was telling her that one day I was walking down there and there's some guy in the parallel bars, and those parallel bars got to be 10 feet tall, 10 feet in the air. But we'll come up with a basic design and then we'll go out to bid. I don't think the design is going to be that expensive. So I'm just going to have some folks that deal with different playground manufacturers come up with something on Google Earth. So it's not like, the field, usually if you figure, 8% of a project and you got a, $500,000 project, you're $40,000. But this is not going to be that much.
And the turf shot put areas. That's done.
So I can tell you that the company that's going to be doing that for us is busy with the satellite school. So until that gets caught up, I'm sure that, they'll move on to that afterwards.
Can they do it during winter?
Yes, because it's fake grass. Yeah.
Anything else, Scott?
I don't think so. I think that's it. I think that's the last one.
Okay. Moving on to board action, recommend approval to increase the total budget for the Farson Greenhouse by $2,500 for a total budget of $49,016. This price increase is due to the greenhouse package of $1,680.00, an estimate of $2,500, not to exceed.
Yeah, we've seen price increases in everything
Yeah.
if you don't get to it right away. And of course, it takes time to go through this process, and the price of that greenhouse did go up.
And Barb did have some contingency money in her 5-year capital projects plan. So that's what she used to get the equipment ordered. But at my suggestion, she came back to the rec board to see if the rec board would be willing to cover that increase in cost since we started this project. Because I believe the PO's been cut, I want to
I
say,
think so.
for the equipment part of it.
Yeah. Just because they didn't want the price to go up. Again,
Well, what's the board's pleasure?
We just take that out discretionary?
Yeah.
you know,
I
we-
would support something
Yeah, we
like that.
approved the project
Yeah.
to begin with, and it's just out of their control if the price has gone up. I think we should do it.
We have to take a motion and vote on that? Okay, I entertain a motion to accept that and approve.
I'll make a motion. to
I'll
accept.
second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, board discussion on deferred maintenance projects, landscaping, sod, Pilot Butte, Satellite High School, Sage Elementary, Stage. Is that Mr. Sorelli?
I think this spring, it looks like we're gonna try this other outfit he is positive he can get rid of the prairie dogs. If he can get rid of the prairie dogs, I think the thing that we need to do first is we bought an aerator that is a state-of-the-art aerator. And I think that what we need to do is get rid of the prairie dogs and take care of the fields. Let's see what we can do over the spring and bring the field back. I've had other people look at the fields and say, other than aerating, and fertilizing, the field should come back. So let's at least give it to the spring and see if it comes back. I mean, if we get any snow at all, we'll know early spring whether it's gonna be okay or not. We've had our guys going around filling holes all last from September, August, September. That's all. We had 2 Elwood service guys come in. First thing he did in the morning is drag the fields and fill in holes. So, and we also threw down some grass seed. It seems like a simple thing to do for maximum effect, and I just think to be, frank, honestly, I just think it's a simple thing to do, and we don't spend the money. Let's see if it comes back. If it doesn't come back, then we have the money set aside. If it does come back, then we have money set aside for other projects. But at least let us try bringing the fields back.
And I think Dan's right. The first thing is get rid of the gophers.
Yeah.
And he's right. We have a company that has assured us that he can give us at least 4. He's recommended 4 places that he's done it to, and they don't have them anymore.
What did he use?
He uses some kind of tablets that they throw them in the hole and then they put a little bit of water down there. And I hate to say this, but you ever watch the old movies like in the 50s when somebody's going to a gas chamber? They drop it down into this bucket of water and and it's almost some kind of gas that just comes through. And then when they see it coming out of the holes, they go around and they plug those holes so that they know, that they're getting what field they're in as far as what colony. But he says that he guarantees, and like Mark said, he's provided references, and I just think it's worth trying that first and bringing those fields back before we start. You tear them up, you're not just looking at the field, and then you still have the prairie dog problem. You got to get rid of the prairie dog problem. And quite honestly, every time we put in sprinkler systems, it becomes expensive. It's just a huge adventure, and I don't know that it's a good idea. Not if we can avoid it.
One of the things on this item when we were preparing the agenda and getting this ready to go, as you can tell, it is listed underneath the deferred maintenance, but to add on to that discussion, prairie dogs, yes, that's a big problem. It's at the basis of all of it. But the other part too, and a lot of it is, in the summer, I ride my bike, I walk that area a lot, but just the, how much manpower it takes our facilities department to keep that, looking great for our taxpayers to use our fields, our sidewalks, with the weeds, some of the bushes in there, making sure our trees are growing the way that they are. And so one of the other things that I would be interested in is, how does this board feel about when I look back at the top shape of our fields, not just on this side of town, but even over on east side, all the different fields, Desert View, all of those areas, places where our kids play that they're proud to go and play. One of the times where it looked the best was truly when our schools were shut down and we were on online solely, because we had extra staff that were able to go outside and help us pull weeds and keep those mowed and fertilized, and things were really looking in top shape. And so when I take a look at it, if there was something that we could do, maybe with Dan, with your department, with facilities, and I have no idea, the pleasure of the rec board about, how all of you feel, but if there was something that we could do, not just the Gophers, but beside that, so that, that the areas are trimmed and they're just things that truly that some of our facilities, for the lack of manpower, we can't get to keep those so that they look, like they should, going all the way through. And I see that, and I hear some of our constituents and our stakeholders talk about that, when they call, and our facilities does a great job as, with as much as they can do, but I just feel like sometimes they're spread so thin with all of the other things that, keeping those lawns, keeping the weeds down, making sure that, they're in tip top and, areas that we're proud of. If there was something that we could do, and I don't know if a contracting service, perhaps we could hire someone and maybe that could come, Dan, I don't know, within your department or something with the rec board, but it just seems like in those summer months, it's hard. You're getting ready for back to school and all those things that we want to get ready to go. And there just isn't the manpower to make that work with what we need. I don't know if you guys have had community people, and I don't get it all the time, but I have had it a little bit. Taxpayers, they want nice green grass, they want the weeds down, and they want it to continue to be a place that they're proud of in there. And when we look at this, we've talked, it's got playground equipment and some of those things that Dan's mentioned, but I wonder, a bigger scope on that project, if there's something that we could do that takes that a step further after we lose the Gophers. But I've seen it in, all of our lawns, and I think you guys have too, especially you just got to drive by during the summer and spring. You see it.
Okay.
Would the board ever think of entertaining, because there are some things that we have on our fields that we don't use really as a school. We've got baseball fields, we've got softball fields, we've got soccer fields. The kids play on some of them, but those are really truly were put there for the community. I would almost like to ask if I could go and get contracts, contract price to maintain those portions of our buildings and come
So
to the
you're
board.
talking something like to maintain the system and mow the grass?
For like our ball fields that we have, or soccer, whether it's soccer, football, and we would maintain, the areas around the school. What people don't realize is, after the big boom, we now have how many more buildings than what we did before, and how much more property we hit, than we did before. And even though we shut down buildings, we still have to maintain the property, which is long. But our fields are used for football, for Little League football. We do have, I don't know, well, I know why they don't use our baseball fields, because we try to maintain them as best we can, but it really is difficult. And we hire a lot of temporary services, and I think the city does too, for the summer help. And it's been really difficult to maintain. I mean, you hire 8 people and 4 might show up, and then the next day you're down to 3. It's an ongoing battle, and I don't know what else to do other than hire, get someone to take care of the fields that we know the community uses, and maybe the community would use more of our fields. I don't know, but I know that we as a district can't maintain all the property that we have, and we certainly can't, hire it out to be done. We need
So
some help.
do you still do the summer help thing?
We do, but not as many as what we ever did in the past. In fact, I think 3 maybe is all that
Yeah.
we've been able to do with the budget. And I think that's where we've really seen the difference in there. People are keeping up the best that they can, but, the fields go without, despite, the critters that are rolling around out there, but you can see it. I think about the work that has gone into up at the high school, and a lot of what our parents have done to help pull weeds, get things ready to go, get that look in tip-top shape. And I just look at some of our other areas, and it would be great if there was something that we could do so that they were maintained the way that they should be.
Well, that's something that has to be put in the budget, is it not?
It would have to be put in the budget.
How do we look at volunteer type stuff? I know those fields and stuff are big, but as far as Stagecoach Pride group or something that can take care of stuff around there, is there anything like that, or have we ever had anything like that? I think if we, I'm with you, because once you guys fertilized those fields last year, they looked 1,000 times better with just fertilizer.
Yeah.
I don't know from where I work if there is anybody equipped to go in and maintain those fields. The Parks Department has like 14 people doing the
Yeah.
parks, and you guys have that kind of stuff, and that's big equipment, and that's a lot of money. I don't know how we're going to maintain that without volunteers of some kind.
Yeah, the problem that you run into volunteers is liabilities, our insurance
And
carriers
then,
and stuff.
and then they take over. There's no head.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but I know that we get in trouble a lot of times because you've got groups that want to come out and they want to help, and man, I appreciate that they want to help, I really do. But when you're out there and you're cutting trees, limbs and things like that,
yeah.
I honestly I appreciate the help, but man, I get my guts start turning because if somebody gets hurt, that's what a lot of folks don't understand. If somebody gets hurt, nobody starts out doing a good intention with the idea that they're going to sue.
Yeah.
But if you have something fall and break your back and you can't, make a living anymore, believe me, they're not going to just say, "I don't worry about it."
Yeah.
At least in my mind, that's how I think. And so for the protection of the district, just same as, any entity, I have to make sure that, it's terrible that we have to be like that, but
Yeah.
that's the way it is. So volunteers are great for trivial things, sweeping the parking lots, things like that.
Yeah.
But when you
not-
start putting them on
not when you're running
aerators and,
equipment.
I don't think volunteer thing's gonna work.
yeah, it becomes a whole different thing.
Too big to.
You'd have to
Maintain.
contract it out, and pay 'em.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be something, if we even considered putting it into the rec board, that would be a discretionary fund thing type, I think.
It would.
But you would have to have a pretty involved spec out there saying
I
this is
agree.
what's expected to make
Yep.
sure it gets done.
And then checking it, making sure it is getting done.
Yeah. And on Leo, when you were talking about that was going through my mind. In order for me to ask this board to do something like that, I would have something that is very defined as far as their scope of work. And in fact, I would also probably include something like a Google map so that everyone is aware of who's taking care of what, so that there are no questions. But I think that that's really, we set, hundreds of thousands of dollars literally aside for turf fields. And honestly, I don't know that our grass fields would cost that much, just hiring a company to come in and do them.
That's something to consider for next year.
Okay.
Also lessening the size of some of those,
I'm sorry?
lessening the size of those fields. I know that the intent at Stagecoach was to have soccer on there. That field's not level.
I
for
agree.
one. But if you could lessen the size, throw a tree here and there, landscape it with green, but also some xeriscaping to get rid of some of that, save some
agree.
water. It's kind of like the tennis court area. It's kind of a map that you could just, maybe we get suggestions
Yeah.
but they're way too big. They're not used for that.
Yeah, I agree.
When they do have little league football practice, they need an area this big. They don't need a 100-yard field. So we could eliminate some of that stuff, I think.
Yeah, no, I
In the
I agree
future.
with you. Yeah, well, if you look at satellite is almost xeriscape.
Yeah.
We don't have a whole lot of landscaping around that building at all.
Yeah, and I do think it's beautiful to have grass, but we do have a lot.
Yeah, we do.
East side's another one, probably could be cut down, right?
Yeah, east
They
side.
got that great big field that was meant for soccer too, and then all of a sudden we got turf fields and they.
Either that or maintain one to be an overflow for soccer and put a lot of pride into one, but we can't spread ourselves thin on 8 of them and not use any of them.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree.
But eventually, if we ever do move to this side of town with the high school, that stuff's gonna go away because we'll probably put turf in and things like that.
Yeah.
Well.
I think it would be helpful if we had prices of what you're talking about.
Okay.
Like you said, if you put some Google stuff together, maybe even go out for RFP.
Well, what I'll do first is put a Google map together and get the consensus of the group, because I can send to each individual, I believe, without violating any. I'll send them to Kelly. Kelly can send them out to you guys and look at it. And if everyone's in agreement, or you want to add or delete, then we can do that and just mark it up and send it back to me. And then whatever we
I
get
don't
back.
think there's a contractor here that could handle all of it, but
Actually,
you could
couple,
split it up in 2 or 3 pieces.
a
And
couple years ago, we went for RFPs for the whole district. And we had 3 companies that
Yeah.
showed up with bid.
Really?
Yeah.
Might be the way to go.
Dan, what
Okay.
about the utilities and the watering cycle during the summer and whatnot? And I guess the next question would be, what are the thoughts of the board of covering part of those costs if we have to increase our watering for those areas?
I would think that this year you could probably use this year as a baseline, because this year Matt started off, I think maybe the first 2 weeks, on cycles, and I told him now every day. So I mean, that was the only way that we can maintain, but because it was so dry. But as far as once we get a Google map, if there's any thoughts about downsizing some of the areas that we currently have and going xeriscape, then you'd almost have to have somebody kind of look at it and figure out what it's going to cost. Otherwise, I would just use this last summer as a baseline, and then if we xeriscape certain percentages, and maybe we can scale it back by that percentage.
And Dan, we saw a difference when you started watering that much.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
We
mean,
did. Night and day difference.
yeah.
Don't know if it's an incremental cost because you're watering it more because it has more use from the community. So maybe do something along those lines. But if we're using last year as a baseline, that's probably a pretty high baseline. I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Rather go high and low. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be something that when you go out to get ideas and stuff for the next year's projects, get a proposal put together that we could maybe look at putting into the budget.
Well, most of our fields have a meter on the sprinkler
Yeah.
system, so we can tell how much water is being used per field and kind of break it down like that by that.
Okay. Anything else on those? All right. I guess our next meeting's January 6th, and unless anybody else has anything else to discuss, let's entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, see you in January.